I recently felt like playing a racing game, and out of sheer laziness for not wanting to get up and grab my Switch, I started searching through Steam. It didn't take me long to quickly remember my love for Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, so I bought the older Sonic and SEGA All-Stars Racing to play something I hadn't before. The character roster and racing track inspirations are all taken from an assortment of SEGA titles, all of which had a pretty unique aesthetic to go with them. And this is what made me realise how little of these games I had actually played. Coupled with a desire to finish more games and also make a video, I decided to dive into 3 of the series I was most interested in, and make a mini essay of sorts for each one. With every visit to a new virtual world, I was welcomed with a different genre, a new experience, and a whirlwind of nostalgic bliss. So here's my love letter to SEGA classics. Sonic Adventure was my 3rd experience with the series. I had previously only played Sonic R and the first Sonic the Hedgehog game, so I was looking forward to jumping into my first 3D platformer title. I love the structure of having multiple character campaigns, each with their own gameplay style and approach to levels that you may have already played through as someone else. While there were some characters I preferred over others, their stories were short enough to keep switching things up. From Big the Cat's fishing to Knuckles searching for the missing emerald pieces, you'll always get a fresh gameplay and story perspective to jump into, all in whatever order you choose. It was interesting to read about the development process and notably how the team wanted to make use of the new graphical capabilities of the Dreamcast. They strove to create more realistic game worlds than they ever had before, and put a lot of effort into research. In fact, the core members of the Sonic Adventure development team went on a trip to Central and South America. Although ruins and jungles had been used before in previous Sonic titles, none of the team members had actually gone to any such locales in person before, instead taking their inspiration from movies, TV shows, and other popular media. Filming their trip and taking pictures of everything in sight, many of their images were then used in the creation of locations such as Emerald Coast, Lost World, and the Mystic Ruins. Not just as inspiration, but in some cases literally. Many of the textures found in the more realistic areas of the game were lifted straight from the team's collected photographs. But despite this endeavour, the places in Sonic Adventure are incredibly unrealistic, even more so by today's standards. Obviously, this is an unfair comparison, but my point isn't that failing to be realistic is a problem. If anything, it's one of my favourite things about the game. The wide streets and spacious pavements are empty save for a few people, and there's pretty much nobody in the elaborately decorated train station. A shocking sight for anyone using public transport in a highly populated city. The cars driving through the streets just loop around over and over again, with the entrance and exit being what looks like an underground car park. As well as this, the only way to access an entire street is through a hotel lobby and the train station. There's even a large hole in the ground that drops you into the sewers, then the way out leads you into a toy store. For a city that we're supposed to believe is being lived in, nothing makes sense. But the developers weren't necessarily trying to give us a hyper-realistic city and functional urban planning. Instead, they crafted us a 3D playground, and in that way, they succeeded. I enjoyed spending time searching for oddities around Station Square, and throwing that guy in the brown suit all over the place. We see more apparent cases of play within the areas of the city that are turned into levels. Beaches, amusement parks, and highways are all constructed with Sonic in mind. Towering platforms and inconceivably lengthy roads are somehow suspended above the city. The spaces of the levels and the adventure field of Station Square don't match up at all. Those larger-than-life structures aren't visible from the hub area, only their entrances are. In a way, it all feels detached, but that's what keeps it so interesting. Regardless, you move so quickly through these places, it's hardly noticeable unless you stop and take in your surroundings. And for a game that's all about going fast, you can see why you might not feel compelled to. and you can also understand why a bustling city would have proved a little troublesome when it came to movement. It would have been frustrating to have your flow of traversal be interrupted too often, so the environment was also built to accommodate the character's speeds. Even at the start of Sonic Adventure 2, we grind down the rail of an impossibly long staircase that would have been an absolute nightmare to walk down at normal human speed, but they make for one explosive and memorable introduction. These locations in Sonic Adventure reminded me of Earthbound, with town layouts and the shapes of roads being pleasantly illogical. Artist Koichi Oyama spoke about the creation of the game's world, in which he says, "The visuals in Mother 2 are pretty far from the reality of daily life. For example, you could say that this or that plant could never grow in this or that environment. Some illustrators do extensive research for their drawings, but I do not really pay much attention to that." Thus, by playing it again recently, I had the feeling that the roads could have been somewhat rectified. In fact, I have only just obtained my driver's license recently. That is why the way I designed cars and streets back then lacked realism. That is why, while I was playing Mother 2, I said to myself, are these traffic lights at the right place? I hadn't even thought about whether the traffic should be on the right or on the left. While Oyama sees this kind of thing as a flaw, he admits this is what made the game original. And he's absolutely right. There's something so lovable about these strange little worlds. And I felt exactly the same way about Sonic Adventure. Seeing the juxtaposition of real textures on low poly objects was kind of adorable, and having parts of reality injected into a virtual world where cars loop around the same streets for all eternity gives it character in a way. This impossible city was an absolute joy to explore, and the unrealness based off of reality is something I couldn't appreciate more. Space Channel 5, often instantly recognisable by its protagonist Ulala, is a rhythm game whereby you copy the actions of your opponents. The big band music, poses, and guns all come together like a psychedelic 60s spy movie in space. But what sticks out the most is the game's approach to late 60s and 70s retrofuturism. The costumes of the characters in the games all don harsh bright colours, simplistic patterns, and strange shapes. The shine and lack of creases on Ulala's structured clothes give the impression of a plastic or vinyl texture, a material often associated with the minimalist aesthetic of a future in space. One of the artists who worked on the concepts and models of Space Channel 5 was Jake Kasdal, who once said in an interview, "I think one of the key inspiration sources for all of us was Barbarella, and once we started really defining what the game was, we started taking it further and further. I remember all of us laughing at the sheer ridiculousness of some of the later characters in the game, just spacey and as nutty as you could make it. There's an essence of camp throughout the game's character designs and over-the-top sequences. So having Barbarella cited as an inspiration for Ulala's character makes a lot of sense, especially with the setting and great costume design. Space Channel 5's dedication to retrofuturism doesn't stop at fashion. It also features heavily in the environments of the games, from architecture to interior design. You may not spend much time admiring the backdrops when you're focused on the rhythm-based gameplay, especially given the blurry pre-rendered backgrounds of the first title, causing your eyes to naturally gravitate towards the characters on screen. There's a lot of curved edges when it comes to the design of space stations, and there's plenty of egg-shaped technology. There's a good deal of roundness present in the environment design, which provides an incredible sense of softness on the eyes. There are large white rooms with floors and walls so clean they could be mirrors, and the pops of colour in the furniture of the first area remind me of the chairs by designer Olivier Morgue, which you may know from 2001: A Space Odyssey. These contrasting and limited colour palettes give a great sense of modernity, and that's something that Space Channel 5 utilises in order to create such stylish interiors. I also think of the 1976 film Logan's Run, which similarly favours blunt edges as opposed to sharper corners and structures, as well as costume design that features a bright outfit, which mostly picks a single colour to run with. Iconic interior designers like Joe Colombo also come to mind, whose specific use of colour and shape create an otherworldly yet soothing atmosphere. The soft contours of the furniture and wall features effortlessly depict the contemporary nature of it all, while still retaining a feel of being out of date given the outmoded vision of a past future. The 2003 Marnie flagship store, which was designed by architects from the studio Cyberite, has a futuristic visual flair too. Its elliptical shapes and sculptural elements make this clothing store look like a stylish spaceship. There's an impressive fluidity that I can't help but marvel at, but it probably didn't make the most functional clothing store. Likewise, Space Channel 5 has design elements that don't make sense when it comes to practicality, but offers a visual air of unrivaled otherness. It's a bit more ruthless with its bright colour palette compared to the film and real-life examples I've spoken about, often using very aggressive neon colours, but that essence of ugliness makes it even more endearing. I've never seen a game that looks quite like this, and its presentation of a psychedelic ghost of a future that never came to fruition makes me wish the future looked this good.
The House of the Dead.
In making this video, I got to experience a rail shooter, a genre I've never tried before, and given the typically short length of them, I played through the first 3 games of the House of the Dead series. I enjoyed them for their simple gameplay and constant momentum, but also how concise they were, as well as the little quirks like the game over screen that looks like someone just went wild with the pencil tool in Microsoft Paint. And how could I forget that incredible voice acting?
My God, how could anyone do this? How could anyone do this?
What the?
What? What?
But when I got to the 3rd game, I was disappointed. The formula was the same, so that wasn't the issue. Funnily enough, it was the graphical upgrade. While the first 2 games were far more gothic in their world design with the use of a dark mansion or demonic enemies, they also had that low poly charm, with the detail being made up for in its pixelated textures. The 3rd felt bland in comparison. With smoother visuals, everything looked less detailed, and the enemy design now far removed from the more gothic influences of the previous titles, which were way more visually striking. And even in 2021, I was impressed by how well they held up. In the same way, I prefer playing Ace Attorney on the DS, as opposed to the HD ports. I think it's down to part nostalgia, but also that it just looks effortlessly more detailed than the smoother, more modern graphics. And this preference for aged graphics is something I'm not alone in. In recent years, there's been a resurgence of the low poly style, particularly in the horror scene. Games like Paratopic, Elisa, The Glass Staircase, or anything by Puppet Combo are among them. The list is huge and ever-growing still, and I am not kidding when I say I could make a whole video just reading them out. There's even a game jam dedicated to this style, with Haunted PS1 showcasing retro horror demos that are growing increasingly popular in the indie scene. These collections are brimming with what feels like eerie lost media, almost like a cursed game disc you would find in the attic of an abandoned haunted house. This also brings me onto the existence of demakes, a concept I first came across with the Lucius demake, which I've noticed is reviewed slightly better than the original. There's also Dusk 82 coming soon, a demake of Dusk, and I've even seen a PS1 era inspired Bloodborne circulating on social media. There's also 98 demake, who creates demonstrations of what modern games would look like if they were released in 1998. This means recreating the technical limitations of the hardware in some cases, but this isn't always the same with other developers, who instead prefer to use only the aesthetic of older games while implementing more modern and refined gameplay and movement systems. Retro horror has that level of obscurity from the absence of modern graphical definition, something which undoubtedly works for this genre. The grainy surrealism and dreamlike fuzziness leaves things up to your imagination, forming a far more terrifying image in your head. There's something so satisfyingly crunchy about these visuals. It feels sharp but lacks clarity. It never gives up too much nor too little. I've often struggled to connect with hyperrealism, unless given a premise or setting significantly detached from reality. Instead, I gravitate towards heavily stylized works, or in this case, the blocky appeal of these visuals that were once lost to technical evolution. The PS1 era was filled with experimental titles and wonderful ideas, which isn't really the case today. The AAA sphere often relies on tried and true formulas, resulting in a lot of unoriginality. I'd rather see a janky game that does something different than a perfectly polished game that I've already seen too many times. There was a sense of creativity lost to the prioritization of profits, but that is now being rekindled by smaller, passionate game devs. Developer Cullen Dwyer, working on Demon Throttle, words it perfectly in an interview for Edge magazine. I'd say that my love and draw towards retro games isn't actually about nostalgia at all. It's more this feeling of a lack of a design rulebook with all these old games that makes them feel special. Developers were really out there trying strange things and inventing and innovating, even if a lot of those ideas didn't quite stick, in a way that doesn't happen as often now. As well as horror, there's also been a rise in 90s style shooters like Quake, which was given a 4K remaster only a month ago. But there are modern takes too, such as Dusk, Ultrakill, and HROT, all of which have been received extremely well by players. While modern games usually look to the future, it's nice to delve into the nostalgic delights of those that look to the past, and I thank House of the Dead for reminding me of that. My journey through impossible cities, low-poly gothic mansions, and psychedelic space stations was one I'll never forget. This era of SEGA was so full of interesting premises and unique aesthetics. The Dreamcast undoubtedly had some incredible games. Creating this video has made me realise how underrated the console was, and how I should try out some of the other classic titles as well. I've had new experiences not just with the video games, but with video format too. I was genuinely impressed by how distinctive each series was, and didn't initially expect to be inspired to talk about more than one of them. But as you can see, I was pleasantly surprised. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed these 3 mini-essays. Be sure to let me know which one was your favourite, and if there are any other Dreamcast titles I should play. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.